We are live-ish, waiting for startup. It is there's so much for us to talk about today, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean it is a
Chock filled.
yeah, chock filled. I mean, the thing about Donald Trump is he never leaves us with nothing to talk about.
Unfortunately, that is correct.
That's like his specialty. But if you're tuning in, click those likes so more people can see us
Yeah.
talking about this stuff because I promise you, I mean, just even this morning, Trump maybe protected one of Democrats' most at risk congressmen. Um, Henry Cuellar down in Texas, he pardoned him. I think was that Azerbaijan that had bribed him or
I don't know. I don't even know.
he and his wife were accused of taking some sort of bribes from foreign countries and charged by the Justice Department. But Trump likes politicians who've been charged with things that much that he pardoned him, even though it's a district Trump won and is the like one of the top Republican pickup targets in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. People brought up the Honduras pardon, which is so friggin' egregious. It's ridiculous. But, people were like, well, he probably got some kind of bribe to do it. And that's possible. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that was the case with Trump. But I actually suspect that the explanation is a lot simpler, which is that if someone tells him that a politician's been treated unfairly,
Barely, yep.
Trump's favorite word. If those of you who know a narcissist, like it's their favorite word. Um, and I think that he just thinks he treated unfairly, and so I'm going to help them out somehow. And I think
Yeah, I
that's probably
mean,
the best
uh,
explanation for why he did it.
I forget which country's president he just pardoned who was actually like a drug
Honduras,
kingpin.
Honduras.
Honduras. Well, the guy just wrote him a letter being like, I was treated very unfairly. And Trump was like, well, then we
Well, then
must pardon you.
say no more. Say no
Yo,
more.
Donald, I've been treated very unfairly. Would you like to give me $1 million, please?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would, be very fine taking some of that money. But it's unbelievable that he does stuff like this. But
No,
it's
it's
been
ridiculous.
it's been a newsy week. I guess we should start with the Tennessee special
You know
election.
what? Let's hit the smaller stories, and then we'll jump on to Tennessee when
Sure.
more people get
Okay.
in here.
The other story that jumped at me this morning, I sent Michael this quote. Elise Stefanik, he certainly wouldn't have the votes to be speaker if there was a roll call vote tomorrow, the New York lawmaker said. I
Talk about
believe that
Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Speaker Mike Johnson, I believe the majority of Republicans would vote for new leadership. It's that widespread. And things are bad for the Republicans in the House, especially right now. They were struggling to pass a rule yesterday to govern debate for the week because some of them are upset. They've got discharge petitions left and right. And some of this is that Mike Johnson is a uniquely like gross figure in our politics in that he's the
Boy,
kind of
by the way, that is really saying something if you consider
I would
uniquely gross
say
figures in our current politics.
yeah, because he's uniquely gross in that first of all, he's got the kind of smarmy,
Yeah,
like
he is
it's
smarmy
not fair to use car salesmen to compare him to them because like
because you don't want to slur car salesmen.
Lynn, he's a weenie, but he also like he got up and told his caucus yesterday that they're gonna win seats in the midterms, which he can't possibly believe. He's lying to his own caucus and he
Yeah, he
wonders why
really
none of them
is.
trust him. And he just does whatever Trump says. He doesn't care about the institution. He's just a really feckless, weak, pathetic kind of figure, and no one likes him.
Say what you
He's
really
the
think,
kind of
Brian.
guy,
Don't
his
don't
own
mince words here.
caucus doesn't like him. And it's not like we're talking about a bunch of moral paragons in the Republican House caucus. I mean, these people are a bunch of nut jobs and unethical Trump bootlickers, but it's really they don't like him any better than the rest of us. So it's something to watch, especially because there were reports. I guess it was last week, or maybe we talked about it 2 weeks ago. I've lost all track of time. That there's a possibility that some Republicans think they may lose the majority this Congress.
I don't think
Um,
that's going to
I,
happen.
I really don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
But the thing is we're headed towards a midterm that Republicans think is going to be really bad. They're starting to actually catch on.
Yeah, they are
And
catching on. Yeah.
retirements are coming, folks. I know Michael and I promised you this after Election Day, and the only one we got over Thanksgiving was my I'm just amused by this. Troy Nels from Texas, who is the ultimate Trumper, retired, and like 5 minutes later, his twin brother Trevor announced he was running, which means that everybody voting is going to think they're voting for the same guy.
Exactly.
They're not even going to know the difference. But the thing is, they're coming. These retirements, people have, first of all, they went home for the holidays, and I'm sure they have relatives being like, "Why are you putting up with this crap?
Yeah.
Like, you have threats against you. This is very unpleasant. You're constantly on the road traveling." Um, but the retirements are coming. Okay, and the reason that some of these folks resign instead of just retiring is that there's a lobbying ban for a year after they leave
Right.
office. So they want to get a jump on that so they can start making money. And
Yeah.
some of them are already trading it in for like a lucrative private sector gig.
Yeah.
So there's some thought that some of these folks might resign, especially because there's no incentive. There's nothing like there's no agenda for them to pass next year. They literally
No, they have
have no
nothing.
agenda.
They have no legislative
Nothing.
agenda.
Nothing. I mean, it is the legislative agenda, the Seinfeldian legislative agenda. It is, they have nothing. Not a
Yeah.
single proposal, not a single,
It's a
it's
Congress
all
about nothing, is what you're
nothing.
saying.
That's right. Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed.
I
So can
mean,
I?
and
Yeah.
so
Yep.
they're coming. They're getting out. It's a miserable experience for everyone on Capitol Hill right now.
Can I ask a question? I'm curious
Yeah.
your take on this, the Stefanik news that she is, that, her criticizing Johnson. There was a poll out earlier this week that had her losing by 20 points to Kathy Hochul for the New York governor's race. She's announced she's running for governor. I have thought for quite a while here that I am baffled as to why she is taking on this race, which she almost certainly will lose. I mean, look, it's a blue state. She is not a very popular figure. I don't think, has without any ability to do well in New York City, for example. And it's going to be a really good Democratic environment in 2026. So I just don't see any chance here. And I'm wondering, is she doing this, attacking Johnson, because she wants the speaker job, or because she wants to be the majority leader or the leader of the caucus? I don't really get what her motivation is here.
I think she is someone who has uniquely misplayed our politics.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
she
that's a good
started
take.
out as a moderate, a
She did.
genuine, like, I'm Democrats' favorite Republican kind of thing, because she was from a district that Obama had won a couple of times.
Yeah,
And then she started looking at Trump's margins in her district. It was the kind of white working class district that swung hard to Trump. And all of a sudden, she decided during the first impeachment investigation to remake herself into Queen MAGA.
yeah,
Okay, which would have made sense except for the fact that if you have statewide ambitions in a blue state, that's not the recipe for winning, as Jack Ciattarelli just learned in the adjacent state in New Jersey. So then she desperately wanted to be UN ambassador. And the reason she hates Johnson is that she blames him for her not getting that job. That he
yeah,
convinced Trump that they couldn't afford to lose her seat. It was going to be an even more difficult special election than one they just had in Tennessee by a few points, and a better fit for the district for the Democrats, and they were worried about it. So he withdrew the nomination. And
yeah,
so, I mean, most people think it's a kamikaze gubernatorial campaign with the hope that Trump appoints her to something for term two. Or maybe she wants to be on the I wouldn't say Fox News isn't cool enough anymore, but she wants to be like the next conservative podcaster or
I just
something
don't
like
get.
that.
Yeah, but I don't get why she's running for governor. I mean, maybe it's because she has nothing else to do, but she's not going to
Yeah.
win. I feel confident
And,
saying she is not going to win this race.
I think she's dead in the water. I think it's a question of does she lose by 10 or 20? The one thing I would say about does she want to be speaker, does she want to be majority leader? There's a real wrinkle here. Because Mike Johnson and Donald Trump started this redistricting war that we can talk about more in a minute because we always have news on that. New York is going to get redistricted eventually.
Yeah.
It's not going to
Well,
happen for this
2028,
cycle,
2028
but
probably.
like 2028. But okay, but if Elise Stefanik is the majority leader or the speaker, what is your incentive as a Democrat? That is to embarrass the other party by drawing her out of her district. So, I think she has to get out of the House, and I think she knows that because if she's in any sort of position of power in the House, I think they just redraw her and put her in an impossible district. and either force her to run against another Republican member from upstate New York in some sort of vote sync district, i.e., they put all the Republicans in one district, or they draw her out of her seat because, only been three speakers to lose. Two of them were right before the Civil War, right around the Civil War, and
And Tom
the other
Foley.
was Tom Foley in 1994. So it would be the kind of embarrassment thing that in our current politics would be likely to happen. So I don't think she wants to stay in the House. I think she's kind of trapped because she's super
She is. I
ambitious.
agree with that. I think she is trapped. I think she's in a
And the
no-win
irony is her
situation.
original branding, her 2014 to like 2019 branding of I'm a moderate, I'm Democrats' favorite Republicans might have opened doors down the line in New York. Instead, by going MAGA, she, curried favor with Trump, great. But now she has no statewide path because
Yeah,
Democrats loathe her. And because almost everyone's like, okay, this person is two-faced. She has no core principles. She's reinvented herself like three times now, She's,
yeah. I
I
think it's
don't know what she's doing.
all you're saying is right, and I think what she should be holding out for is to stay in the House and wait until a cabinet position opens up because it inevitably will. That happen. I mean, it's no one. The cabinet's not everyone ever serves for all 4 years, and just wait for Trump to appoint her. I mean, Trump does owe her one, and I suspect that she could lobby on behalf of because of what happened with the UN ambassador position. She could lobby on behalf of herself to get a cabinet position at some point. I mean, look, I mean, I don't think she would get the job if Pete Hegseth gets pushed out, but I do begin to wonder
Well,
how much longer Hegseth is in
Michael,
the position.
I'm a little bit worried about Pete. He went on with Katie Miller on her podcast, Stephen Miller's
Oh,
wife,
God.
and said that he eats the same breakfast every morning: bacon, eggs, and sausage.
Ooh.
And that doesn't sound good for your arteries,
No, but
Pete,
knowing Hegseth is
buddy.
probably just something he's lying about. It's all performative. I just want to say I gotta go on a rant here, if I might. I
Sure.
hope that anyone objects. Yesterday, Trump held a cabinet meeting.
We should have special music for your rant.
I know, we really should. I should work on that. Uh,
Maybe we get the Lewis Black character from the Disney movie with the head exploding to lead into it.
I mean,
Probably copyright issues there.
I should be like Michael's rant with a little guest music or something. Um, so yesterday, Trump had his cabinet meeting, and uh, you know, we don't talk a lot in this particular Substack Live about how uniquely horrible our current president is, and uniquely horrible people who work for him. But let's take a moment to just really dig into this because a couple things happen at this particular cabinet meeting that just I don't know make me nauseous. So first, of course, every member of the cabinet feels the need to kiss Trump's ass and tell him how great he is, and it is so pathetic to watch people who have achieved a great deal in politics reduce themselves to basically, lick spittles uh, when it comes to Trump. And this happens every couple of months. He has cabinet meetings, and it seems like the only purpose of these cabinet meetings is to people to, stroke Trump's ego. And in fact, he was so uninterested in what folks were saying beyond praise for him that he fell asleep numerous times. And I got to give the Washington Post a little shout out here because they had a whole story about how
So
Trump
the
fell asleep.
Times.
Times did as
Times
well,
also
yes.
had.
It's about time that this gets more coverage, that Trump is clear. And there was a piece, by the way, a big piece in the Times a few days ago about how Trump is having his age is showing. And I think it's been clear for some time. So that's one thing that happened. The second thing, is that Pete Hegseth is such a garbage person. And I don't use that expression mildly. It's a toxic thing to say, and I'm sometimes uncomfortable using that expression, but it applies to Pete Hegseth. He is a horrible person, and he uh, this double tap strike in the Caribbean against these drug smugglers, wounded survivors. He has basically thrown Admiral Bradley, the commander of the operation, under the
Mitch
bus.
Bradley.
Mitch Bradley. Now, I want to be clear. Mitch Bradley should get run over by a bus. Not literally, I mean more figuratively, because he ordered a military strike that clearly violates uh, international law, the laws of armed conflict, and sure constitutes murder, in my opinion. Um, but Hegseth, of course, was doing this because he wanted to avoid taking responsibility for his own actions, which is sort of like what he does all the time. And I understand, by the way, there's a he's already breaking an IG report, Inspector General report from the Pentagon about his use of Signal, which suggests that he put the lives of American troops in danger by using Signal chat during the Yemen strikes. This was the Signal Gate story back from March. Um, so, and of course he lied. Of course, what's interesting about this story is what he said in the cabinet meeting was that initially the administration's argument was this is fake news. This didn't really happen. This is all made up, even though the Post had 7 sources, anonymous sources, who said this did happen. And now the new message from them is that, oh no, we did the second strike, but it wasn't me. It was Mitch Bradley who did it. I mean, it's just so clearly contrived, and so clearly an effort to, um, you know, deny responsibility for the
And by the
actions.
way, if I could just interrupt for 2 seconds, he's following the lead of his boss, who's claimed he knows nothing about this and everything like
Well,
that.
actually, Trump said he would not have ordered the second strike, which I thought
Right,
was really
right, right.
interesting.
But he
Really
said like,
interesting.
oh, I know nothing. I know not. You're president, buddy. You don't get to fall back on that.
No, that's always what he does. I mean, you remember during COVID when he basically said he was asked, do you take responsibility for what's happening? And he basically said, no, I don't take any responsibility
Mm.
at all. I also want to just say, but the other thing I want to talk about that is really important here is that Trump unleashed this absolutely disgusting, revolting rant against Somali Americans, um, calling them garbage, saying he doesn't want them in this country. He wants them to go back to where they came from, accusing them of all being corrupt and being on welfare. I mean, and again, I'll give the Times a shout out here because the Times ran, I thought, a pretty good piece that was really, I think, pretty lacerating in its rhetoric, in its prose, basically saying this was an unambiguous bigotry on the part of the president. This is one of the grossest things Trump has ever done as president, and I'm not exaggerating. To basically attack an entire group of Americans, some people who, by the way, are citizens, and call them garbage is just something that I can't even imagine a president ever doing. This is like the Haitians eat dogs story from the campaign, but like 100 times worse. And I just want to say, like, we sometimes, I think, compartmentalize a lot of the outrages from Trump. This is really outrageous what he did and what he said, and I just think we should not let it pass. Just how gross this attack was, and how diminishing it is of a group of Americans who do not deserve to be attacked by the president in this manner.
I agree with that, and I was struck yesterday by it being the kind of story that had in term one would have been the story of this week.
Yeah,
And immediately we moved on because we're just so desensitized and used to the
because
fact
there's
that Donald
outrages
Trump
every
behaves
hour.
right, right,
Yeah,
right. But behaves in a way that would have been absolutely unimaginable for any other president. You look at George W. Bush after 9/11, and he didn't say stuff like this.
no, so the
He
opposite.
went in the opposite direction. And that goes for Ronald Reagan, that goes for, every president in the modern era. And let's be clear, look, the reason people are talking about Somalis, there's a legitimate scandal in Minnesota about welfare fraud or nonprofit fraud and funneling money back to Somalia and things like that. And look, it's not a good look for Tim Walz. And by the way, there are consequences to Trump's rhetoric. He used a slur for disabled people when referring to Tim Walz because he was talking about this scandal last week. And one of those Indiana state senators whose
Yeah,
votes are about to be crucial on the map, who has a child, I think it was with Down syndrome,
yeah,
um, was deeply offended and said, "I'm not voting for this." And maybe the president can spend the next year working on actually convincing the American people that, like, he's doing good things and stuff like
yeah,
that. So there are some consequences, but he's using language, dehumanizing language about all of his opponents. And I also bring this back a little bit, Michael. We're talking about, the Mark Kellys of the world and things, and the Indiana state senators. We're talking about pipe bombs, threats against the Indiana state senators. We're talking about Mark Kelly's now walking around with the security detail.
yep,
Donald Trump's rhetoric matters. I remember reading, I think it was in maybe Peter Baker and Susan Glasser's George W. Bush book, or maybe it was just Peter's book. I don't remember, but where they quote someone sort of saying that George W. Bush was a very different man when the cameras were off, because when the cameras were on, he understood that his words carried that much weight because he's president
right.
of the United States. And Donald Trump does the opposite. He acts like he's still just a random guy on Twitter, who can say whatever the hell he wants. And that's not true. His
Yeah.
words are dangerous. They
Yeah.
are resulting in people's lives being at risk.
I think I read some.
And
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead.
I mean that is just shameful. He's the president of the United States, and this is just so unbecoming and so disgusting. And I mean, and I'll remind you again, for all of you out there, this is language and behavior that most people would not accept from their children. They would not accept this from adolescents. They wouldn't accept it from toddlers.
Yeah.
And we're getting it from the president of the United States. The only difference is he falls asleep on camera all the time because he's old. That's it.
Do you know? Can I? But I think I read somewhere that something like 9 Indiana Republicans have been swatted, which means they've had
I think we're up to
accusation.
10.
Yeah. So, and if this Indiana redistricting passes, and I think it passed the House, but it still hasn't gone through a vote in the Senate, it'll pass because the Trump and his acolytes have basically threatened these people into voting for these new maps in Indiana. Let's make no mistake about it. That's what's driving this. So I
And
just,
several of them, by the way, came out and said, "I hope my colleagues like don't lose their guts over this." And the House is going to vote on Friday, and then they're going to come back next week and decide what they're doing. But the fact of the matter is, this is disgusting to use violence in this way. You know, it's not quite stormtrooper type stuff, um, like you see with dictators, but it's only a degree removed from that to be,
I don't
using
disagree.
language and then not trying to tone things down when people say this, the rhetoric has consequences. Violent rhetoric is dangerous. And God knows, anytime that anything happens to anyone on the right, people jump on the left's rhetoric. And yet, none of those people, it's all crickets when Donald Trump says this stuff, when he uses disgusting, dehumanizing language.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I want to, before we jump into Tennessee, and we got to get to that, I want to just mention one other thing really quickly. There was an interesting post story in the New York Post this week that was basically an attack on Kash Patel. And it contained a lot of anonymous sources, basically, for lack of a better term, crapping all over Patel and his leadership at the FBI, which really, this is the New York Post, which is a conservative outlet. It made me think maybe people in the White House want to get rid of Kash Patel. I do wonder if he's going to survive, but I have a bigger question about Pete Hegseth. I really do think that Hegseth is in serious political trouble. I think the combination of this story about the military strikes in the Caribbean, plus the Signal IG report's going to come out this week. Um, I and the fact that Republican chairmen of both uh, armed services committees in both the House and the Senate
Senate.
have called for hearings. Now, the Senate chairman is Roger Wicker. Wicker has been critical of Hegseth in the past. Um, I kind of get the impression that the Hill has had it with Pete Hegseth, and first of all, the fact that these hearings are even going to happen is a sign that Trump's control over congressional Republicans is slipping. That's one thing. I do wonder, however, if Hegseth could be a sacrificial lamb on this story. And I think, has he become more of a liability than anything else for Trump? So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I do think that we should keep our eyes on both Patel and Hegseth, that both of them could be in trouble. And I think Patel, the issue is more internal, that I think the White House is not happy with him. And he seems completely over his head in his job, which was to be fully expected. With Hegseth, I do wonder if it's just a political liability and one that maybe the White House wants to get rid of. So I'm just saying, just put it out there. Keep an eye on this story. I'm not saying Hegseth is going to get pushed out for sure, but I think it's a real possibility. And I'm curious to see how the story unfolds and what the reaction, by the way, this is what I'm curious to see, what the reaction will be on the Hill to the Inspector General report on his use of the Signal app. If they are basically not defending him or critical of him, I think it would speak to his diminishing lack of political support on Capitol Hill.
I said this to my subscribers at the World According to Brian yesterday, that I'm watching this story to see what it says about Hill Republicans' willingness to deviate from Donald
Yeah,
Trump, to
yeah,
challenge Donald Trump, because it does seem like this is the first thing of, I would say, real substance. To me, Epstein, and I'm not trying to minimize Epstein in any way, shape, or form, but as a political issue, it's not an ideological issue, it's not a policy thing. Um, this is the first like kind of sort of more substantive thing where I look at it and say, okay, they're uncomfortable with what Trump's doing. From Jim Justice, the senator from West Virginia, saying this goes over the line, to I think John Husted from Ohio said, "Hey, we're creeping close to war." Um,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, to Roger Wicker saying we're going to have hearings. And I think I read that the Armed Services Committee, I'm blanking on which house is meeting with Mitch Bradley on Thursday, if I saw that
I
right.
think it's the House, but
I
don't quote me
thought
on that.
that's exactly what I'm thinking as well. Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and his ranking member, who I think is Adam Smith from Washington, are going to meet with
Wait,
him.
who's the Republican committee chairman on the House side?
I think it's Mike Rogers,
Yeah, and Rogers is
from
running for Senate.
Alabama. No,
Oh,
no,
oh,
no.
the guy from Alabama. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting.
There are two
Forgive me.
Mike
That was.
Rogers, one
I
from
got confused.
Michigan,
Right.
both national security backgrounds. This is Mike Rogers from Alabama, who is the Armed Services Committee chairman in the House. And let's be honest, where has Donald Trump had his most uh, roughest relationship? I would say it's with the national security hawks. And a lot of these guys in the Armed Services Committee are still old-fashioned national security hawks. And a lot of them are older. Wicker's in his 70s. I don't know how old Rogers is offhand, but like these are people who don't have as much to lose.
Uh,
Now, where I disagree with Michael, I may disagree with you on the fate of Hegseth and Patel. To my way of thinking, one thing that Trump learned from term one is that when the pressure builds to get rid of people, as long as they are loyal to him and do as he says, I don't think he's as worried about them being political liabilities in the way that other presidents would, because the calculus is totally different. The calculus is, Kesh, will you let me weaponize the FBI? Um, Pete, will you let me use troops domestically and do whatever I want with them?
I can let me just say this. We really have to jump to Tennessee in a second, but let me just say this: that I think on Hegseth, though, that if there are calls for him to resign, which I think Don Bacon has kind of hinted at that, although he's retiring, then I do think it becomes more difficult for Trump to resist that because then you know he becomes a liability to the administration. Now, I take your point that he may not care all that much, but I get the impression. I think your point on Wicker is well founded. I don't think Wicker gives a shit at this point
No.
about Trump, and I think he has criticized Hegseth in the past. He criticized him a little bit during the hearings. He, of course, still voted to confirm him. I'm not. But your point is why I'm sort of suspicious. Not suspicious. Why I'm skeptical that this is going to happen. I do think it's a real possibility, especially the Signal report is really negative. But we will see.
Oh,
But it's
let
what
me
we.
bring in
Yeah.
one thing for 20 seconds that is worth it.
Yeah.
Apparently, Hegseth talked to the press corps at the Pentagon today,
Oh
and
my
I'm
God.
using that because did you see who asked questions at the briefing yesterday, Michael?
Matt Gates. Matt Gates.
Matt Gates was one, Laura Loomer was another. They have this story has flown below the radar, and it is somewhat inside baseball, but they basically kicked all of the regular reporters out of the Pentagon because they won't follow their rules. And they replaced them with a bunch of MAGA, I won't even call them hacks because they're not journalists. Shit posters is the better way of putting it. And so they're avoiding scrutiny over there by having the press briefing every day be Matt Gates and Laura Loomer sitting there and asking questions,
Can I
people
just
like
say
that.
that press briefing looked like the bar scene from Star Wars? I mean, it was just a collection of the motliest individuals you can possibly imagine. And it's pathetic. I mean, and by the way, just so we're clear, the person who was running this press conference was a woman named Kingsley Wilson, who is a documented anti-Semite, of course, in this administration. And of course, her boss is Sean Parnell, who you know who that is, because he was
Yep.
running for Senate in Pennsylvania and dropped out
He lasted
because
like
of
two whole
allegations.
days.
Uh, I'm sorry,
He lasted like two whole days
right?
in
Because
his.
of allegations that he
Yep.
beat his wife and his children.
Yep. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Let's jump on to Tennessee because that's really the
Okay.
story of the day. And so the results came in yesterday. Republican Matt Van Epps won the Tennessee House special election in Tennessee's 7th district. He won it by about 9 points, which is 13 points worse than Donald Trump's performance in 2024. So that actually is in
And
line. Go ahead. Sorry. What are
uh,
you saying?
I was gonna say it's about 10.6 points worse than the like base partisanship of the district,
Right.
which is like 19 and a half.
But the 13 points off of Trump's margin or overperformance from Kamala Harris's performance is in line with how Democrats have done in special elections so far this year. So this was
It's
consistent with
actually
earlier results,
right online. As
right
someone
on
said,
line.
the performance for the Democrat Upton Ben was like a replacement level performance. This is where
Absolutely.
right on the average of where Democrats have been for special elections all along. Now, notably, this turnout
Yeah,
was
that's the point I wanted to get to. Yes.
it's as high as the 2022 midterms were in this
Almost
district.
matched 2022 turnout.
Yeah, which to me is significant because it says that we can read much more into into this race than to some of these other special elections. Because the recipe in special elections is turnout, right? Usually people, this is 2 days after Thanksgiving weekend, people are not paying attention, they don't know what's going on. And so you get these low turnouts. Well, in this case, Republicans understood that a low turnout could have been fatal. So they really invested a lot of money to get the turnout up, and
Yep.
it worked. But because it was basically midterm turnout, it gives us insight into what the turnout might look like next year because it was midterm turnout, but it was to the left. It was a significantly more liberal electorate than the one that voted in 2022. And I think it's not unreasonable to look at these results and say, okay, if the election were tomorrow, the midterms would feature something like a 13-point swing from where things were in 2024. Now, obviously, over 11 months, a lot can change. But that is a very bad sign for Republicans. And as we've talked about before, I don't think people understand. I know there were people on the left who were angry that people were saying, well, this is a victory for Democrats. And what they're not getting is that when we've talked about this, when you have a result like this, you have Republicans in districts who have not had competitive races in the past now saying,
Yep.
hmm, do I really want to run a competitive race? Lisa Desjardins from PBS NewsHour had a list of all the Republicans who won by 13 or less. And these are the guys between 7 and 13 points. And for those of you out there, if you look at a list, I'm omitting the Californians because the districts are different. But Ryan Zinke in Montana, Eli Crane in Arizona, who has a well-funded challenger, Jonathan Nez, who is the president of one of the Native American reservations or something out there, I think. Anna Paulina Luna, who's a lunatic from
She's a
Florida.
lunatic.
Yeah, Lauren Boebert from Colorado, who carpetbagged across the state for a better district. Bill Huizenga, and we're going to get to him in a minute or two. Ann Wagner from Missouri. Laurel Lee, I think it is, from Florida. Brian Fitzpatrick from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Rob Whitman, who is probably going to face a much more Democratic district in Virginia. Mike Carey in Ohio. Abe Hamadea from Arizona.
Arizona.
Why do retirements matter, Michael? I looked up Mike Turner this morning because Mike Turner is the former chairman of the Intelligence Committee. They got rid of him because he wasn't Trumpy enough. He's from
Right.
around Dayton, Ohio, and they just redrew his district to make it more Republican. But it's a district that he cruises in routinely, and it's a district that Trump only won by 8 points. So if you look at that 13-point swing, if a guy like Mike Turner says, you know what, I don't feel like taking a tough reelection on and retires, that district all of a sudden is almost a toss-up in this environment. And
Yeah.
that's why this matters. It helps Democratic recruiting, it helps Democratic fundraising, it energizes things, and it demoralizes Republicans and sends them to the sidelines.
So Lynn Muster is a great question. I know the public might not understand the significance of the only a 9 point win, but I'm guessing the politicians do, right? Right, they do. And so let me tell you a little piece of knowledge that a consultant I spoke to once said to me, that the thing that a incumbent member of Congress is most afraid of is a competitive election. The fact is that most members of Congress do not have to worry about competitive elections. I'm working on a larger piece about this, and I looked at this recently. Something like 90% of House races are ranked by the Cook Political Report as either safe or likely to one party or the other. So you're talking about 35 seats that are basically in the middle. Now, if there's a 13-point shift from Trump's numbers in 2024, then all of a sudden, a lot of seats that were considered lean or likely Republican are now potentially in play. So even if you're interested that you won by 15 points or 18 points, like a 13-point swing you still have to worry about a close election, right? And the reality in the Tennessee race, it's a very red district, and the Democratic candidate was probably too liberal for the district.
We'll talk about
Um,
that in a minute or two.
yeah. So I think that if you are anywhere between a Trump plus 15 to 18 and below, you're worried. You're worried about facing a competitive election. Now, will people resign? I mean, retire, possibly, but I do think that it opens up opportunities for Democrats, fundraising wise, in places that maybe in an ordinary cycle, races that wouldn't seem competitive at all. So that's
And
the. Go ahead.
there's also the risk that you catch people napping. I'll give you something that jumped out at me yesterday. In an adjacent district to that, Andy Ogles, who was a crackpot. I
He's
think he's
nuts.
one of those guys who sent out one of those Christmas cards with all his kids holding
No, that's
uh,
Thomas. Oh, that yeah, Thomas
Alex
Massey
Mass.
also did that.
I thought they might have both done that
They might have
with
both done it.
guns.
Yeah,
But anyway, Ogles has another slice of Nashville because they sliced Nashville up into three or four districts. I think he won by like 18. It's like an 18 or R plus 18 or 19 district. It's slightly more Democratic. His challenger, Chad Mulder or Chaz Mulder, I think it is, outraised him last quarter, like dramatically. And Mulder has $764,000 in cash on hand to Ogles is 58,000,
whoa,
according to finance
whoa.
campaign finance data. And Republicans are worried that Ogles isn't taking this seriously. He said, you know, this guy, I was ranked a better local official than him. This guy's a mayor of some town in the district, and it's that kind of race. There's always a couple of guys who get caught napping in a wave where, oh, I'm outside of the competitive zone. I don't have to worry. But if Democrats fundraise like Chaz Mulder in this kind of district, all of a sudden, at the very least, Republicans have to sink money into plus 18 and plus 19 districts, which means less money to go to the people who are, say plus 12 or plus 10 or plus
It
8.
also right. It also means less money for seats that might lean Democratic, where a Republican candidate could be competitive,
They
right? So
triage
if
them.
right, if they are basically putting money into lean Republican seats rather than toss up seats, that's not where you want to be. And you could even see likely Republican seats that might be now in play. The
And,
one other thing I want to mention too, and I think is important, is that we're talking about Tennessee. Tennessee is an exceptionally red state, but I live in a place like Texas where.
oh,
So let's talk about Texas again because
you
we
just
had an
helped
interesting.
me.
Oh, I
You,
helped
you
you.
jogged my memory.
Okay. Well, can I
I
make? Oh,
would,
you want to go ahead? Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
you make your point. I was just gonna say between
You're like,
13 and
make your
4,
point. Actually, no, I'm not. Don't make your point. I'm going to keep talking.
13 to 14 points was the Trump margin in Iowa and Texas
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Alaska.
Yeah,
Iowa, Texas, Alaska, and
a
Ohio
lot
was
of Senate
less than that.
races.
So we're talking about those are the four Senate races that take the Senate from being an unrealistic possibility for Democrats to being a realistic possibility. And again, we saw a 13-point swing. If you swung Iowa, Texas, and Alaska by 13 points, all three of them are inside of 1 point in 2024. So
Yeah.
we're talking about something that squarely puts the Senate in play if you got that kind of a swing. And that should scare the crap out of Republicans.
No, it should. But I want to mention about Texas. I'm glad you made your point 'cause it's a good one. But I want to mention on Texas that there's an interesting poll out this week of the Republican Senate primary that has Ken Paxton in first place. He is the very toxic attorney general in Texas, very right wing, lots of scandals, so forth.
His
Third
wife did file for divorce on
place,
biblical grounds.
biblical grounds. That's right. Which means he cheated on her.
Impeached by a Republican state house, too, which I
Yes,
don't think people understand how hard that is.
that is hard to do. Hard to do. So he was in first in the race, and in third place was the incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn. You know, it's a lot of time to go between now and the election, and there's a third candidate, Wesley Hunt, as well. Cornyn is not looking strong, and if Cornyn loses this race, the Texas Senate race suddenly becomes competitive. Well, unless something happens, we'll get to that in a second.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, yeah, you get to that. So there's a Texas Republican Senate seat. If Paxton is the nominee, that will help Democrats. And also, I think it will could have an effect down ballot that it would strengthen Democratic congressional candidates. And don't forget, Texas, you know, redistricted and put some of their Republican members in more difficult districts. So it's this is it could have a cascade effect. Now, I want to talk about Texas for a second because it's important, and this will get to this about. We'll go back to Tennessee in a moment. Jasmine Crockett, who is the Democratic congressman from Texas, is apparently thinking of running for the Senate seat. Right now, it's James Tallarico and Colin Allred and are both in the race. She is I think, terrible candidate. I don't think she can possibly win statewide, although she could win a Democratic primary. There was a poll out I saw last week that said that people who were familiar with the candidates actually gave her a negative rating compared to Tallarico and Allred.
She was
Um,
underwater.
Underwater, yeah. So if she's the Democratic nominee, you can kiss that seat goodbye. Same goes, by the way, with me and Graham Plattner. But the point I bring about Crockett is that, candidate quality does matter. And if you are going to run in a red state as a Democrat, you need to have the best possible candidate. I don't know if it's Tallarico. I don't, I know it's not Crockett. It probably is Colin Allred. But you have to have a good candidate. And that could be an issue in Texas, could be an issue in Maine. It was an issue in Tennessee's 7th District. I do think that Afton Ben, who was the Democratic candidate, had taken some rather liberal positions. Actually, not even
Defund
liberal
the
positions.
police.
She took some extreme positions on defund the police, for example, that I think probably hurt her and probably helped bring up Republican turnout. So would a more moderate candidate won the race? It's a 9-point loss. So no, I don't think so. But would it have shaved maybe a few points off the margin? Possibly. So I do think that like the candidate quality matters, but it matters especially in places like you have to have a perfect candidate to win. You really do. You have to have two things have to happen. You have to have a perfect candidate, and Republicans have to nominate somebody who is truly toxic, and that could
You know
happen in
who
Texas.
the last Democrat to win a Senate race in Texas is, right?
Was Lloyd Bentsen, I believe.
That's correct. Lloyd Benson's last reelection in like 1990, 88 or 90, I think. I think it was 88 was his
Yeah,
last
because he ran for
reelection.
vice president and
Yeah,
Senate the same year. Because
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the LBJ law that
yeah,
allowed him to run
yeah,
for Senate and VP in
for
1960.
both. And that cost the Democrats his Senate seat in 1961 in a special election. But
That's
anyway,
right.
I agree with everything
Do you
Michael
know
said. And I
who
would
won that race? You know who won that race?
John Tower.
That's right. Very good.
It's
Very
John
good.
Tower Senate seat. Um, but so I would agree with everything Michael said, and I actually underscore it. I got a lot of crap on social media from people screaming about me, the white man, telling Jasmine Crockett she shouldn't run. I said that Barack Obama should call her and tell her not to run because she's exactly the kind of candidate who scares me. And people thought that this was some sort of racialized or sexualized thing. It's not at all. It is. We're talking about a congresswoman who called the um, disabled governor, Greg Abbott, Governor Hot Wheels. He's in a wheelchair
Wheelchair.
because a tree fell on him when he was running decades ago, and he's not able to walk. And
Yeah.
she called him Governor Hot Wheels. She is a firebrand. Her messaging can be amusing at times, but it goes way too far at other times. And again, it's a red state. You have to know your district or your state. Afton Ben was the most liberal candidate in a four-way primary. Okay. And one thing that jumped out at me was that the county that moved the second most, every single county in this district moved towards the Democrats last night. And the county that moved the second least was Williamson County. And Williamson County is a suburban county outside of Nashville that was the most highly educated district that Trump or county that Trump won by the most in 2024. It was the district with the highest educational attainment, like 62% of bachelor's degrees, and Trump won it by a lot. Okay. So we're talking about a conservative suburb. We're talking about the kinds of people who are probably practicing Christians, maybe gun owners. Um, they're not the suburbanites you find outside of Philadelphia or New York or places like that necessarily. But it struck me that most of the rural counties, all but one in that district, moved further towards Afton Bend than
It is
did
really strange, by the way.
Williamson County.
It's a very
And
strange outcome.
there are two possible theories that I've heard tossed around. One is that she ran as a populist economically, and that was not going to go over well with more affluent suburbanites. The other possibility, though, is that some of her cultural positions, defund the police, and things like that were anathema to those voters. Voters who, if you look in other places, it's the suburban places that are swinging the hardest to the Democrats.
Yep.
In places like Georgia, if you look at those public service commissioner races that we talked about, or last night, Democrats won the mayorship in Roswell,
Roswell,
Georgia,
Georgia. Yeah.
outside of Atlanta, like those places are swinging to Democrats, but you have to give them Republicans or Democrats who are palatable. And the Jasmine Crockett's of the world, the Afton Bens of the world are not that. And I have no problem with people like that. People think that, oh, Michael and I are up here. We just hate the left so much. Look, if AOC wants to run for Senate in New York, fine. It's New York. We're not going to lose that seat in 2028 because AOC is the nominee. I have no problem with having people in the left in elected office. I just think we have to be very, very cautious and careful in primaries that you don't lose winnable races. And Republicans have put on a master class in how to do this over the last 15 years. I mean, we've talked about
Yeah.
Christine
Yeah.
O'Donnell and Ken Buck and Richard Murdoch
Sharon
and all
Angle
the
and Todd
Sharon
Aiken
Angle,
and
Todd
Roy
Aiken. I mean,
Moore.
Roy Moore, they just have made an absolute textbook study of how you don't nominate people. And I think that Democrats, that the biggest risk to Democrats right now is that the people who feel like, Joe Biden didn't do the right thing in 2024,
That's right, Robert.
by sticking around as long as he did, uh, that weakens the establishment's hold in the primary electorate. Democrats have always been better at getting their candidates through primaries. Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah.
And if that
True.
weakens, especially because in some of these competitive races, Mike Lawler's seat in New York is one. I think there's one in Michigan where there's four, five, six candidates. What helped Afton Ben is she won the primary with less than 28% of the vote, right? Like we're not talking about somebody who got a majority. But in these multi-candidate primaries, two, three, four candidates, 35%, 30% can win you a primary. And I think Democrats are going to have to be very aggressive in these primary races.
Well, yes, you're right. No disagreement, but I just will say this as a caveat that then when she ran for that primary seat in the in the campaign, I mean, no one was paying attention to this race, and nobody thought she was going to be competitive. Everything changed after the New Jersey and Virginia results. I think, to be honest with you, people should have been paying more attention because Democrats have been doing so well in special elections, but they weren't. I want to say one other thing about the Ben race that I think is important just to reference here. She lost by about 9 points, which is, again, 13 points better than Harris's performance in 2024. One thing to keep in mind is that uh, Republicans poured a lot of money into this race, a lot, more money than Democrats did, something like $3 million plus dollars. Trump did a tele rally. Mike Johnson was in the district. They really made a hard push on to get Republican turnout. And, it's, I think, why Epps won. I mean, it's had a lot to do with why Epps won, but he still underperformed by 13 points. So, you're not going to see that kind of investment and time and energy being put into a race in a midterm election. You might, and I mean, you'll see money being put in, but I don't think you're going to see a kind of money being put in a race that's like a plus 22 Republican district. So I do think that makes a difference. And I do think that we should look at Ben's, performance as a harbinger for of what could be coming in 2026. I think it's a good indication also that, and I keep bringing this point up, that 2024 is a bit of an outlier in our recent politics, right? I'm one of the points I love making about when you talk about sort of where the direction of the country has been the last, 20 years or so. Democrats have won the popular vote in 7 of the last 9 presidential elections. That didn't that last time that happened was from 1932 to 1964, I believe. Um, so and that was a period of sustained Democratic political dominance. So Democrats have 7 out of 9 popular vote. They've only won the presidency in 5 of those elections because in 2 of those elections, 2016 and 2000, the popular vote winner lost, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton. But I bring this up to say that Democrats have since the early 90s have been the preferred political party among not majority, plurality of Americans, right? Only one Democrat, only one Republican has gotten more than 50% of the vote in a presidential election since 1992. And that was George W. Bush in 2004. I think it was 50.3 or 50.4. Trump didn't do it. And Trump only won by a point and a half last time in 2024. Um, so I bring this up to say that I think we should look at what happened in 2024 as something of an outlier, that Kamala Harris underperformed for a variety of reasons. I don't, some of them are her fault, but I think most of them are just environmental issues and also being a new candidate and being a woman. I think, as I said before, I think that she underperformed among male voters because she's a woman. Um, but I think that what it means is that 22-point victory for Trump in that seventh House district in Tennessee is probably a bit of an outlier. And the race that district is probably a little bit less Republican than it seems, or that it seemed from that election. And a 13-point shift is reflective, I think, of people not being happy with Trump. I think it's also reflective of the fact that 2024, again, was maybe not where the country is in general, and that 2024, again, is something of an outlier.
Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that. And Michael, if you could send a link to our guest while I'm going
Oh,
through
I
this.
I I did send a
Oh, she
co-host
said,
thing to her.
okay. All right. I'll send that message in a second. I think we sometimes forget that Democrats were dominant because Hillary Clinton and Al Gore lost the electoral college when winning the popular vote, which was just honestly had catastrophic consequences because that's why Republicans control the Supreme Court. But anyway, I would point out that we got House polling from a couple of districts that Trump won today, and Bill Huizenga out in Western Michigan. I mentioned him. He's ahead 44 to 42 with 14% undecided over his opponent, and Donald Trump is 49-45. uh, I don't, it says 49-45 unfavorable, so I don't know if that means that he's underwater or how they're listing that, but it's not a great number for him in a district he won. And even worse, Janelle Stelson is beating Scott Perry in Pennsylvania's 10th around Harrisburg. This is a rematch. Perry is the former head of the House Freedom Caucus, 48-44 in this poll. And the number that jumped out at me is that Trump was disapproval was 54, approval was 43 in a district he won, which
Wow.
is a really terrible number. And Perry's numbers were even worse, 53 disapproved, 36 approved. So it's a sign both that the wave is building, but also that you're right that 2024 might have been an outlier. And by the way, I don't know we'll have time to get to this before our guest hops on, but one problem with some of these Republican redistricting maps is even if that Indiana map passes, I think it knocks two districts down to like 16 points. Well, those races are going to be competitive in a 13-point environment, 14-point environment. It looks like Joanna joined as a guest that we have to get her on as
Oh,
co-host. We'll figure that
I I
the system
sent
is terrible, folks.
I sent her a
But
co-host link. I don't know why she's not able to be on it. I did send her a
let's
link.
see. We'll figure this out. Let's see.
Sorry, guys. This is very frustrating. I know.
It's hard. It's not like the old days of like talk radio where someone just calls in on a phone line and they're there.
I'm
Um,
gonna I'm gonna Joanna, if you're listening, if you're on the phone, I'm gonna cancel the send.
oh,
Oh,
there
there
we
she
go.
is.
All
There
right,
we go.
we figured the
I'm
Hey,
technology
hoping
out.
it worked.
it
Yeah,
did
Yeah,
work.
it,
I know.
Joanna has a Substack. She understands that this technology is just not the best.
Could be better.
It's Substack. Yeah, you guys, I love Substack. It's so wonderful to be able to communicate directly with people, but every time I go live, it's like a new experience. So I hope you
100%.
can see me and hear me. Can you?
We
Yeah,
can see
yes,
you
we
and we can
can,
hear you.
and we are thrilled to have you
Yay. I've
with
been
us.
listening to your conversation, so I've got some
What
to add.
what would you like to
Oh, great.
add on Tennessee and other things?
Well, I agree on when I watched her interview on Defund the Police, it was like a CNN interview where she was asked to just explain like why she had had that position. And she was like, well, I'm supposed to be a representative of the people, I'm elected to represent. Okay, sure. But like, what is your position? Like,
Yeah.
this pretty clear question. And she couldn't answer it. That's when I was like, I'm going to tune out of this because we're not winning it. And it's not like I don't see us winning those elections. In fact, I thought exactly what you're saying about Iowa. I mean, I've worked in Iowa, back in the caucuses and then a gubernatorial, and I think Iowa is ripe for the right kind of leadership this time around. But I see that candidate just not being the right candidate
Yeah.
to motivate people ultimately for what was, an important election, but like you're running against a military veteran who has like substance on defense and you can't explain your answer on defund the police.
Can,
I didn't think it worked.
I want to ask you a question about this, if you don't mind. Joanna,
Yeah.
the one thing that's interesting to me, I mean, I talked to a lot of folks in the district in Tennessee about this, and one argument that they made was, though she was progressive and that would hurt her among Republicans, that it would actually help drive turnout among Democrats in the district. And I have to be honest, like, I found that argument not totally compelling. My sense was that Democrats would vote for an inanimate carbon rod, as long as it had a D next to it right now, because they hate Trump and they want to send a message to Republicans. And I'm curious what you think. I mean, is there an argument to be made that she drove turnout higher because she was more
And by the
progressive? And
way, that was her theory of the case because her last like tele rally was AOC and Pramila Jayapal with Al Gore. Like
Yeah.
that's not what you do in an R+22.
Here's my problem with that is I think that especially in places like Tennessee, Galesburg, Illinois, my hometown, you need a real economic message. And there was a gap, I felt like, when I was watching her. It's not just, fight back on Trump or, we're going to bring about lower prices without actually like talking about the economics. But I think Democrats are really missing an opportunity to talk about bringing manufacturing jobs, bringing good jobs back to America, how you're going to bring up the wage for people, how you're going to grow the economy while you're making America affordable. I think there is something that some of our candidates are speaking to. Mamdani did effectively. And
yeah,
I think, because I didn't hear that as much, like bringing out all the progressives and expecting that to translate is not like in and of itself having an economic message. And her background is more like social work and kind of the social services. And that's, it motivates a certain person. And I think it's really important. But I would say, for this next time to run against Trump in particular, Trump has been so strong on tariffs for so long. And it's a position that Democrats used to have. I mean, Democrats used to be against free trade, and we haven't, as a party, I think, explained to people our position on trade. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges the Democrats are going to have.
it's interesting. I mean, I will say one thing in defense of Bain here, which is that I watched a bunch of her ads, and she sort of it was a very populist message. I mean, she did focus on
Yeah.
the Epstein file, at least initially. She went kind of populist, but my suspicion is that there are limitations to how effective that will be if you don't have the credibility to if your credibility is undermined by you having taken positions that are just out of sync with the district. And that's kind of what my sense of it was. But I also wonder, like, maybe a more moderate candidate also loses by 9 points. I just think this is maybe the best you're going to, or maybe loses by 6 or 7 points, but 6, 7,
I think it
sorry,
would have been
but still loses.
My son would be so excited right now.
Got to do it every time. Got to do it.
I mean, so
I,
I would say to the Epstein files, like I keep saying, and I am very curious how he had all of these connections. Like I saw Kathy Rumler's name in it, and of course it was
Yeah,
Kathy with the Obama administration, and I was like, what on earth? Like,
she's
how
all
did this
over it.
happen? Yes, how did this happen? Like, I don't understand how he had ties to every powerful person, and I have some real questions. But talking about Epstein does not bring health care for all.
I
And
agree.
like that's my biggest frustration is like right now we have a healthcare crisis, we have a housing crisis, we have school crisis. Like too many of our schools are not educating our kids. And I hate to say it, but like we're going to have to talk about these issues in, I think, a really authentic way. And so, I guess to take messages and like try to translate them. I don't know. I think a candidate selection matters, and it matters about having people who have personal stories. Like Mamdani actually stood with the workers when it was important. Like that stuff matters. People who have real connections in their districts who can speak about it really authentically. I think that's going to bring about a Democratic victory. And the fact that Trump, if he doesn't, he said yesterday, heard you guys talking about very long, very effusive cabinet meeting, which produced nothing of
Effusive.
like actual results out of any of the agencies. But the thing he said in it, and all of his cabinet agencies were like heads were talking about how this next year is going to be the best economy on record. There's going to be record tax returns to Americans. They're going to, and I had someone in LA ask me when they can expect their $2,000 tariff refund, like it had already been blessed. And I had to be like, whoa, like, I don't know where you're getting your news, but like that hasn't been blessed. Trump's talking about it, but right now there's a Supreme Court case and that may not come about at all. So like, I think there's this expectation that Trump has set up. If he fails at that expectation, I think you're going to have a lot of candidates, including candidates that aren't the best selection, defeat Republicans. But
Well,
I do think it's important for us to have really competent Democrats.
yeah, but look, he said something yesterday. I mean, he said this about affordability as a made up thing and it's a crock, which he
Mhm.
said repeatedly. And I mean, here's the problem that I think Republicans have. I don't think they realize that Trump doesn't give a shit about what happens in the midterm elections, except that he might get impeached. He's not
That's
interested
it.
in doing anything to change his behavior to help the Republican Party. And I mean, and so it's just the same like talking points all directed at MAGA. And I was struck by something that JD Vance said, where he uses talking point, which he's used repeatedly, about how the housing crisis is the result of having undocumented immigrants in the country that are taking the housing stock away from America. It's such a ludicrous argument. It's so offensive, and it's ridiculous. But here's the thing: who is buying that bullshit? All right, forgive my language, but who is believing that except outside of MAGA world? I don't think anybody is. I mean, you look at the
So,
polls and people, they overwhelmingly blame. Oh, he blamed Biden for this, by the way. Of course, people
yeah.
blame not Biden; they blame Trump for the economy. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
may
Yeah,
have a unique perspective because so many of my family members are MAGA and MAGA
interesting.
tangential. They are supporting, I mean, my dad voted against me when I was working with President Obama the first time around.
Hmm.
He voted for President Obama the second time around. He had met him. He really hated Mitt Romney because he thought Mitt Romney was like a prep school kid. And, you know, he's not like he's the one who got my mom pregnant in Catholic school, had to drop out and go to public school and like,
Interesting. Interesting.
different. So,
It's a
what
Substack after dark right here. This is very interesting.
after dark. But I actually think, you know, when it comes to that argument, Galesburg, Illinois is not a place that has a ton of immigrants. It could actually probably be bolstered, our economy, by more immigrants. But Galesburg
Hmm.
is a place that lost Maytag. So Maytag moved to Mexico. And that, you know, was a very big feeling in Galesburg that we're losing manufacturing. And of course, during that time when NAFTA was passed, we were talking about the O.J. Simpson trial and like, oh man, I think about the fact that like we were so distracted against the issues that really mattered and drove, you know, trade changes and Galesburg, which used to have a massive railroad industry. We had 2 railroad stops in Galesburg. I mean, it's lost a lot of that. And so there is this thought that that people, especially from Mexico in Galesburg, you know, have taken jobs.
Right.
And then I've had a family member who has worked for Caterpillar, gone to Mexico and seen good jobs that they believe should be in America,
Right.
even if it's automated and higher, you know, pay type jobs. But they see it, and then it is, you know, like there is a reality there that that they want someone to fight against. So this light sometimes goes off. Sorry, but I think like when JD Vance says that stuff, there is a deep rooted frustration that can connect with people, even though, you know, we know it's not true. And we know that if 2 things, you know, they both say, you know, they're sucking off of the social system and they're buying houses that other people would buy. Like those things cannot be true.
Yeah. No.
They-
it makes no
over the
sense.
course of history,
Yeah.
immigration has added to our economy and like all of these things. But there is no one other than Donald Trump. And I would say Ro Khanna actually went back to Galesburg, Illinois, and is talking about some of these things and is talking about that economy in a way that I think is interesting, that I think will pull more people in. But that is a big gap in Democratic messaging still, and Democratic policy, to be honest.
Well, let me ask you about something that Michael and I have argued about some, which is, that there's two schools of thought in Democratic politics right now. There's a school of thought that says, okay, we're not getting a lot of these places back. We're not going to win South Dakota again. We're not going to win, at least not in our lifetimes. We're not going to win, some of these red states that, in so much as that's a problem in the Senate, the answer is let's get a majority and let's make DC a state. Let's make Puerto Rico a state. Let's, play
That's my
hardball
position.
politics. That's Michael's. I am more of the let's try to win these places back. Let's try to be a big tent party. You know rural America a lot better than I do. Is that a possibility? And if so, what is it going to take?
It's yes, it's a possibility. And I think it's a far more likely possibility than even, an adding Puerto Rico and like DC situation. Like there again, there is a resentment in Galesburg to people like Jeff Bezos and Amazon. They've taken over, like our small businesses have been driven out. So when you see Donald Trump at inauguration surround himself with all of these oligarchs, this is not a good look for a place that is struggling significantly and has a lot of resentment towards this population that's really sucked money out. Like technology has sucked money out, and what we've seen in a place like Galesburg is our small businesses have gone under. So people are able to buy cheap crap really fast, but half of the town is struggling to buy anything at Walmart. So, yes, absolutely. With the right candidates, the right message, and I think there has to be a real awareness or something on, what's happening with like Amazon was so against unions, and there's a percentage that's bought into that in our communities that think that unions haven't been providing jobs. Like I remember a family member having to join a union, and they felt like they were all political and not actually helping their job. So, there's an anti-institutionalism that has to do with that, but also like unions haven't necessarily kept pace with like what's ahead. And, in too many cases, like my husband's union negotiated away his pension for any younger workers, but older workers, when their pensions were at stake, they wanted my husband to strike. And he's like, why would I strike? Like for older workers' pensions when you've gotten rid of it. So I think there are some problems in like the what has actually built the middle class and what has built the Democratic Party that we're not discussing, that if we actually had a like really effective union corps, if we had a really effective like workers, people like working people's rights movement, really we're looking after those kinds of people who are really struggling in this country right now, and put that first, and take the position that we're not taking money from all the big business and everything like that. And I am very conscious that I was part of a campaign that said we didn't want to be at the disadvantage, and then we took that money, so we set up a lot of the precedent. But I think that we lost our way, and because we lost our way, we lost our roots, and we lost a lot of those people who were strong Democratic voters in places like Galesburg that I think if we had the right candidate and we actually fought for them, we would get them back.
So here's my I think here's the flip side of that argument, which is that but what you're describing, the perfect candidate you're describing is Sherrod Brown, who's a protectionist, who is pro union, economic populist. won in Ohio in 2018, one of three Democrats to win in a state that Trump had won in 2016, and then lost in 2024. Now, he did do much better than Kamala Harris. I think he outran her by 7.5 or 8 points, something like that. But I think what happened to Sherrod Brown was that the partisan lean in Ohio became just too extreme for him to outrun. Now, he is running again in this cycle, and this may be, in a bad cycle for Republicans, which Trump is unpopular. It might be enough for him to win. But I think my concern a little bit with the idea that Democrats can win these places is that we have become so polarized along partisan identity, along tribal identity, that it is just very hard to convince Republicans to vote for a Democrat. I mean, if I think I'm aware, there's not a single state in the country that where let me think. No, actually, I shouldn't say that. There's a bunch of swing states where Democrats won and Trump also won. But in the red states, there's not a single Democratic
No,
senator left.
there's
And
no
I don't,
state. The stat you're looking for is there's no state where Trump won 3 times
right,
would Democrats have a Senate.
Democrats won. Now, that could
And
change in 2026 with Roy Cooper. Um,
Yeah.
but I just think, this is the challenge for Democrats is that okay, this year, maybe they can win Ohio, maybe they can win Alaska if they get the right candidate, maybe they can win in Texas. But beyond that, it's hard to see where they can really be competitive.
I think the thing about Sherrod Brown is, I think we need a new generation.
Yeah,
I
sure.
I mean, I do appreciate, that there's a good, and Joe Biden was one of those people who was like, a good union guy until,
Sure.
I mean, I think he would say he's still, to this day, like he's going to be a union guy through and through. It didn't have necessarily the same effect as, even like talking about how we bring the automotive industry back. And like we saw in LA, we had our unions out here strike against artificial intelligence being used. And
Right.
because we don't have the laws against it, and internationally, they're using artificial intelligence and they're undercutting us. So, I think every state, like I'm one who, I don't know, maybe I'm a little like, I still believe in the Electoral College. I believe in states' rights. I actually am very grateful for states' rights now that Donald Trump is in power because I live in California. Like, I'm one who believes in, the republic, and I believe that our senators should represent their people and not necessarily a party. So, like, the issues are going to be different in, different states. And certainly California benefits a lot more from trade because we've got so many ports and we've still got manufacturing here. And we've still got, a very different economy than a place like Galesburg, Illinois. I think Galesburg, Illinois is going to need a very different candidate than California. And I do not believe that Gavin Newsom is going to be our nominee. But that is evidently
Oh, interesting. You
not
get into that.
yeah, I mean, we can talk about that, but I do not believe that that's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. He is certainly able to troll online, and sometimes I do enjoy it, but like that's the extent. And I would say, like in California, he has not, like to the extent I've been a public school mom, public school supporter. Our schools were shut down during the pandemic. He had his kids in private school.
Right.
He is claiming now that, he's made our schools great because he's brought about free lunch for all students. I'm a huge fan of free lunch for all students, but we've cut our teachers and we have bigger classroom sizes at the same time, which is like not the trade-off that I want. So, I think, there's a real need in this next election to talk about the issues that that affect both the state and then on the national level. I think you have to be able to appeal because of the Electoral College to those states that have lost manufacturing and have lost their base.
The funny thing on Newsom, I agreed with you, but then I do think what he's done, I think politically is very smart, is he has become the fighter in chief of the Democratic Party, which is what people seem to want. I mean, rank and file Democrats want. And I think look, I'll give him credit on one thing that maybe more than one thing, but on this particular thing, he put his neck out on this redistricting proposal and
He
it
did.
passed. And
did.
that was a it could have gone against him, and he won. And that's the kind of thing that a lot of Democrats like about him. And I think he's raised his stock. Brian and I have this conversation a lot about. I see this race in 2028 right now between sort of the populist Gavin Newsom and the sort of technocratic Josh Shapiro. And I have my own preferences, which one I prefer. But I think right now, I think Newsom has the upper hand because people are looking for that. And that doesn't mean he's going to win. I agree with you. He's got a lot of liabilities. He's got a lot of skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
But
A lot.
the school point is the point I've been making to you, which he has all this baggage. And
Yeah, I know.
he
I
was
know.
in office in the pandemic. Shapiro was not. Now I have not seen the new Atlantic profile yet on Shapiro
I haven't read it
that
yet.
just
Yeah.
dropped today. But whether it's Shapiro, whether it's Mark Kelly, who is now sounding more and more like a presidential
Oh, Mark
candidate.
Kelly. Yeah,
I think
he's
Mark
risen.
Kelly's gonna run. You've got Wes Moore. Ro Khanna, I literally was like, please run for governor of California. And he said, no, he's much more focused on the, federal level. And I was like, is this an announcement for your presidential campaign? Because it certainly seemed like it. I
Can
think
he run? Can he really run and win if Newsom's going to run? I mean, do you think he's going to get
He'll run.
Well,
overshadowed?
and then Michael, when was the last time we got a president of the House? Wasn't it like Polk
One.
or Garfield
He's
or
done
Polk.
once.
It's Polk.
yeah.
Which is
I
why I
mean,
was like, run for governor. He wasn't
so
listening to me.
you said Mark Kelly. What about
Yeah.
who do you think is the better 2028 Democrat from Arizona? Is it Kelly or is it Ruben Gallego?
Oh, it's definitely Kelly. Mark Kelly.
Oh, really?
100%.
Go on.
Yeah.
Why?
Gallego. There are a lot of women in our Obama circles who are not necessarily Gallego fans.
Interesting.
I think, Mark Kelly with Gabby Giffords has a very strong case. He's dedicated his life to this country. He's not super eloquent.
That's the thing. Yeah.
I've been
If I
watching
could just give him an infusion of charisma, it would be so nice.
Where's the Obama but I don't want him to sound like Obama. When candidates try to do that, I hate it. So it's but I want them to sound like their authentic self and just be very confident speaking. And I watched his press conference. Was it yesterday or the day before that he did the press conference on that he, of course, has now been, under scrutiny from Trump. And he was basically, pushing back on all of this. But it was 45 minutes to an hour. It was very long and it was kind of all over the place. And I was like, this could have been, a very short, these are the problems with him on foreign policy. This is the problem with Pete Hegseth, which are many. And I do think Pete Hegseth will roll at some point. I've been surprised that more haven't, but I honestly think he's waiting for Joni Ernst because appointing the first female defense secretary. And Joni, has been such she was an ally. And then,
she voted for Hegseth.
She ultimately did. I think they were frustrated that she wasn't going to right away. But I just think that, there could be a better defense secretary. And they've got to know that. I mean, also SS yesterday, the Secretary of War that
I saw that. Yes,
his nameplate was spelled wrong, and it's who did this to him?
I mean, maybe we're the three of us not alone in not liking Pete Hegseth. Maybe there's people inside the White House who don't like him either.
I didn't mention this when we were talking about him before, but part of the thing that has generated blowback on the Hill is they can't get any information. No one will talk to them in the DOD. He's pissed all these people off on personal issues and internal communication stuff.
Truly, I've got this dog who's over to the side and she just whines. So we didn't hear the dog.
We love dogs.
We are both fans.
We could rename the show Two Bearded Jews Who Love Politics and Dogs.
I love dogs, yes.
So
I love all animals.
I want to ask one more thing on 2028 because my sort of theory of democratic politics, presidential politics, is pretty simple: that the candidate who wins is the candidate who wins Black voters. And one of the pieces that to this day, it just pains me no end. I pitched this piece. I was with the Boston Globe. I pitched this piece about how South Carolina this was in February of 2020. South Carolina is the most important primary because that's the first time that Black voters get to weigh in, and Black voters are a huge percentage of the Democratic Party. And whoever wins South Carolina wins the nomination. And you know this because Obama, of course, that winning South Carolina is what propelled him. Because remember, he won Iowa, lost New Hampshire, but then he won South Carolina, and that's what propelled him to the nomination. Same thing with Biden in 2020. So my question is, who is the Democrat who can win over black voters? And I look at all these candidates, and none of them stand out. And you mentioned Wes Moore before, although I haven't seen him take really any major steps toward running. So I'm just kind of curious, who is the Democrat presidential candidate who can win black voters and win in South Carolina the way that Obama did, Hillary did, and other Democrats have done, and Biden?
So two things. Lynn, I will show you the dog in just a second. And second, I was in South Carolina for President Obama when it was against Hillary Clinton. Like, I went from Iowa to South Carolina. So we won Iowa, we go to South Carolina, and I remember at the time.
You weren't there for New Hampshire. That's good. That's
No.
where he lost, right? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I went to
So
New
you're the
Hampshire
winner.
exactly once. Yeah, I actually, and then I went from South Carolina, I went to Idaho where we beat Hillary Clinton like 80%.
The caucus.
And then, yes, and then I went onward to states. Oh, I did Texas. We won the states I was at. But okay, so South Carolina, what I found so interesting landing in South Carolina was there was a big, like, Barack Obama isn't even black, because he's, of a white mom and of a, African dad. And there was like a level of, a trust in the Clintons that I thought was like, whoa, really? Like, maybe, at that time I was misplaced. But we did an event with Mrs. Obama to reconnect her roots, because her family was actually from South Carolina.
Right.
With South Carolina, and tried to get a lot of coverage for it. And then we took her to a black church. And what was fantastic and amazing, and like I loved the turnout, was, we had everyone from every different background in that black church, like white women, black women, white men. We had everybody. I thought, though, that South Carolina was so different than Iowa, because Iowa is one of those places where people were, they were skeptical of everyone, but, like to a point where it was a joke half the time, but they, really saw it as a big responsibility. Whereas South Carolina, like when we went there, they had this big presumption, but now that he had won Iowa, they were like, okay, now we're willing to listen to you.
Right. Because he won in Iowa. Right.
He won
seems like
in
a serious
Iowa.
candidate.
So it's like, okay, well, we're willing to listen. And then we spent a lot of time trying to connect him and Mrs. Obama to the state, and then he won. I wish that the Democratic Party would not be so dismissive of Iowa, and not, because even of its racial makeup, because it's cheap. Like, it's such a cheap state to compete in. And I think money is some of the biggest problems in our politics right now. But I do think that you're going to have candidates who are trying to appeal across racial and demographic, so, really like economic circumstances. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of where they see as their state. But as I understand, because I watched the Democratic, the last meeting that they had, that's still in the works. Like, what our process is
But
going
isn't
to
South
be is
Carolina
still very much in the works.
it's supposed to be first, right? That was the big change they made.
That
when Biden
was Biden's change. So
Yeah,
what
Right.
I
I
think that's going to
watched.
change again.
So, yeah, exactly. And what I watched from the Democratic Party was they're basically taking like applications type thing from states, and then they're going to debate, what's going to happen. Michigan is another one they're talking about being earlier. But again, Michigan is just so expensive. Like, I don't care if it's Idaho. I really don't. I just want a cheap.
I think a lot of the political
States.
reporters would object to Idaho in January.
But But even if
Probably.
South Carolina is not first, right, it comes down to who can win black voters. Like, that is ultimately
because
what
if it's not South Carolina, they're going to probably put something like Georgia up there, another
Right.
southern state.
And
that
I don't
with
look at any of the
huge
potential
percentage black
nominees.
voters.
And aside from Kamala Harris, I don't see anybody who I think is going to be successful winning black voters. I don't think Harris is going to run, but I do think if she did run, by the way, she's a much more formidable candidate than people are willing to acknowledge. But maybe Shapiro. I don't know. I don't really see who has that upper hand.
Yeah, I wish, because I think of where I came from. I mean, I worked in state politics before I worked with President Obama, but watching him, like, he wouldn't play into like the racial game. Like, he would talk about being a president for all Americans. And I
Right.
actually think that there is a part of resentment like that Kamala Harris kind of did it a little bit too much for even like some in the Black community. Like, they don't want to be pandered. Nobody
Right.
wants to be pandered to. Like, I'm a white woman, I should win your white woman vote. Like, this is just I think that the goal of equality is that we're talking to people as people, but I think we have such an out of balance economic situation. You've got to win back the working class, people who have gotten very frustrated with the Democratic Party because of our, not just connection with money, but like we've set up policies that have helped the wealthy. Like, I think about this in California. So they changed the HOV lanes now. Trump changed it so that you have to have two or more people in the high occupancy vehicles to drive in the HOV lanes. Well, for a long time, everybody was able to buy very expensive EVs from Elon Musk. They were able to drive in that HOV lane. And, and you had a lot of working class people stuck in the main lane. Like, what were we doing? What did we think we were doing to help working class people by putting people who could afford a really expensive electric vehicle in the HOV lanes? Like, this is so, like, it seems like this
Sort
is
of an
not,
elitism, you're saying.
but there's an elitism that has, I think, infected our thinking and our policies. And, again, like Newsom not having his own kids at public school irks me. I think, our public schools should be the best in the nation, like the best schools. Like, I think our public schools should be better than private schools. And I think in many cases they are, actually, and produce better and more well-rounded kids. But we're not, dedicating ourselves and our own most important human capital to that system too much. So my hope is that whoever wins is not only speaking to a true like working class, but also living the life. And I think, I'm not a huge Mamdani fan in the sense that I don't think he's going to be able to accomplish half of what he said he's going to accomplish. Like, I think, we'll see what happens. I hope, that he is able to bring down the cost of housing. And, I'd love childcare for, it to be included because it's a huge gap, especially for women. And so, but I just think, he doesn't necessarily have the experience. So we'll see. But at the same time, like someone like him who's actually lived that life, who actually, understands these kinds of problems and wants to protect Americans and Americans' jobs, I think we'll have a better chance, whatever our primary process is.
So, I live in New York, and I will say my one thing on Mamdani that I think is related to national politics is that it's hard for me to separate Mamdani's message from who he ran against, because
Oh, God.
I think his message was right. I think his message was effective, but I think he also did very well because he ran against maybe the most toxic politician in New York State, which is saying something. And, by the way, that's talking about Andrew Cuomo, of course, who, by the way, still got something like 40% of the vote against Mamdani. And so I think, I really do think a lot of Mamdani's support, I think he's a good politician. I think he was a good candidate. But I think his support came in part from the fact that he ran against somebody who was, I don't think I met a single person who voted for Cuomo who liked Cuomo. It was
I
an
agree with
anti-Mamdani
you
vote.
so much. So I was going to be on our midterm, what was it, 2022. I was on News Nation for like 9 hours, and I was in the editorial meeting that morning. And, Chris Cuomo is now on News
Oh yeah,
Nation.
yeah. How'd
And,
that go?
well, I remember I said, if Kathy Hochul is at all in jeopardy, because of course the Republicans are like, we're going to storm, we're going to do really well. Morgan Ortegas is telling me, I'm so sorry, you're going to have a really rough night. And I was like, if we are at all close in New York, I'm going to blame it all on Cuomo, because I had no love for Cuomo. Like, and they're all like, uh-oh, what are we going to do if she does that? Chris Cuomo is there. And I'm just like,
And she
whatever,
only
it
won
would
by
be
like 4 or 5
Cuomo.
points that election, I
Yeah.
think.
It was tighter than it should have been. And I
Yes.
truly do blame that on Cuomo, and would have. I didn't have the opportunity, and I'm not sure Chris Cuomo is a huge fan
They
of
probably would
mine
have probably would have cut
either.
you off if you said that, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but but I think, Cuomo, you are right, and also people forget these are legacy, like these are nepo babies who had the Rolodexes, like, handed to them when they came into this world, and then take their power and abuse people. I mean, I am so not a fan of Cuomo, so I agree with you. It could have
but
been
but
that, but
but
he also kind of stomped some other decent candidates in the primary.
nah. I mean, look, I've lived in New York for 25 years, and the candidates who run for mayor are generally like just the bottom of the barrel, even the ones who win. And it's just that nobody who ran a primary was worth much of anything really, and they all ran terrible races. But my point on Mamdani and Cuomo though is that he won because people don't like Cuomo, and so my theory on 2026 is pretty straightforward. Democrats are going to win the House back because people don't like Donald Trump. Same thing happened in 2018. Republicans are more likely to nominate shitty candidates, which they did in 2018 and 2022. But I really just think that that this election and like midterms are usually a referendum on the incumbent party. I don't know why 2026 will be any different. And so I look at like someone like Mamdani and I say he's got a good message, but ultimately, did he win because if we ran against? And I ask the same question about Democrats who are running in 2026. Are they going to do well because people just don't like Donald Trump, and he's spectacularly unpopular right now?
It did drive a youth turnout that I think he deserves some credit for. I don't think they are necessarily the ones who are inclined to vote against Cuomo, even though, like, if they knew him, they probably would be. Like, and it doesn't take that much to convince. But I think there's got to be someone who motivates young people to see something that they're fighting for them. So, Medicare for all, I think, the cost of childcare is extraordinary and has to be tackled. Cost of housing is too high. Like, all of these issues need to be issues that someone can, really address. I don't know. I think Shapiro is a really good candidate, and we'll see what he does on the national stage. But I guess I don't know whether he'll really motivate a young audience the same way. And Wes Moore, he just needs to separate himself from Oprah, I think, if he's going to have like a real
Oprah, really?
shot. Which is funny because we, of course, campaigned with Oprah. But
Right?
again,
It's a big endorsement.
this elitism that we were able to connect with, to, like, I guess, uh, validate Obama, is, I think, what people have kind of gone against. So whoever comes next, I think, needs to not be like campaigning with Oprah
And,
Winfrey in
But
the
Brian,
same
can
way
we
you
we
haven't.
did.
Brian bring up the poll that you sent me earlier in the week about young voters?
Oh, the poll that showed that it was like a month by month, and young voters like
Yeah.
approval of Trump they approved him in February, and it has dropped like every 2 or 3 months to like horrific levels, and it just keeps going down. And it points to the argument that Michael's been making, others have made, that 2024, these people, this was not some sort of ideological shift among young voters. This was, we're dissatisfied with the economy. We don't feel
Yeah.
like anyone's talking to us or working for us. And Trump, was kind of interesting. Maybe he could do things for us economically. And they've really soured on him across the board. I mean, we saw that last night. Davidson County moved 20 points to uh, Afton Bend from where Democrats were in 2024. And Nashville was a place I didn't realize that Trump came close to winning downtown Nashville, that it's
Hmm.
relatively young, but it's somewhat right leaning. And you see that this kind of thing where people are just getting fed up with it. And you're talking about elitism. We haven't talked about the pardon that Trump handed down
Oh
to like the
God.
fraudster guy. And apparently it wipes out any restitution too. But like this guy took people's life savings in this like big scheme, and Trump commuted his sentence. I think he served 12 days in jail. But that's the kind of opening of saying, hey, Trump is the elitist guy. We are the hard hat party. And Democrats need to take advantage of that.
He is pardoning so many people who robbed ordinary people. And I mean,
Yeah.
I hated when Biden did it. Biden pardoned that politician, I think was it Illinois politician, like local politician who had stolen from the like population, which I was like, why? Like why do you do these things? And then his son, which I was very frustrated about. But like I think the pardons, the other thing that isn't it is was it the president of Honduras that he
Honduras.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
hey, he just pardoned who's like
A
behind the
drug dealer.
drug. Yeah, I
A
mean,
drug dealer.
truly behind drugs in a lot of our communities, like Galesburg, that has really faced drugs. And he's pardoning him while he's saying that we're fighting this war against
Yeah.
drugs, which is just not true. And like ultimately, when he's saying Maduro needs to go over and over and over, hopefully people get that. But yeah, I think you're right. Like those are things that somebody's got to be able to speak to.
And I
You
want
know,
to ask you, oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Brian. Go ahead.
I know we were talking earlier about Trump's kind of awful rhetoric. Not kind
Mm.
of, just awful rhetoric and heated rhetoric and the violent things. I know you have strong feelings about, how do we either turn the temperature down in our politics, or how do we get rid of this awful streak in our politics? And so I want to let you weigh
I
in.
al- I also think that we have to be very cautious to say it's just Republicans because I think that there are people who will say heinous things. I mean, I still can't believe this
I
is
mean, we're
Jay
talking about
Jones.
Jasmine
Jay,
Crockett.
yes, yes,
Yeah, I mean,
like who say awful things about other human beings, other Americans. Um, I really hated the rant against Somali Americans yesterday, like you. I think, there are people who separated his rhetoric. And I even talked to them. Like I talked to a
Yeah.
former uh, Galesburg High School colleague of mine who voted for Trump, who said like they separate his rhetoric. They would never want those things to be said around their kids or anything like that. But they separate that from his policies and they believe in his policies. They believe that tariffs will bring jobs back to Galesburg. And they want to see someone fighting for America. And they think that he will do that. That is not what he is actually doing. So, like, when you see that it's become all about him, his Nobel Peace Prize, his, like
The ballroom.
the ballroom, in knocking down the White House, the strain that Americans have felt is real. And so, I think when it when it comes to that rhetoric, as much as I hate it, I detest it, I want it out of our politics in both sides. I want us to have representatives who truly represent every one of their constituents, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. I think if we concentrate too much on it, that's not what people actually care about. They care about the policies.
So this is interesting. So I was going to bring something up a second ago that I think my favorite stat from the off-year elections in New Jersey and Virginia. Talking a lot about young people. There's in the exit polls, Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey got 81 and 84% respectively of young women voters between 18 and
Mhm.
29. So they both did well among 18 and 29. They won like 60 something percent, 65, 56, but they won overwhelmingly with women voters. And my little theory, I mean, I think one of the reasons why Trump his numbers have fallen now, why he did poorly in 2018 and 2020, and why other Republicans did badly in 2022, because I don't think women like Trump. I think that's the constituency that actually detests him the most. And you look at the gender gap uh, from the exit polling from New Jersey and Virginia, it's extraordinary how much better Democrats do with women voters than Republicans. And I think I agree with you that you can't focus on the rhetoric, can't focus on how just absolutely like horrible a person Trump is on a regular basis. But having said that, I do think that his horribleness plays differently with different audiences. I think
Mm-hmm.
men, because let's face it, we're the worst. I think a lot of us like actually are okay with Trump's record. I'm not. Brian's not, but a lot of men in America are. But I think women are the group that really, I think, dislike Trump the most. And I think the more he does those rants against Somalis, I think the more he loses support among women, or at least solidifies his opposition of women to him.
First love Spamberger. She, talk about a role model for women. Seeing her little girls, there on stage, her little girls who she's schooling about cleaning their room on
Yes, yes,
stage. I loved that so much. And she's one who, even when, you had her opponent was just like, Abigail, Abigail, Abigail. And, the whole thing was she didn't take bait. She just tried to rise
yeah,
above the whole time. And I think it's a real model for, politics that I love. You are right that in my family, what I found interesting, I was back in Kansas for a family reunion soon before the election. And one of my family members who goes to K State, which is like in Manhattan, Kansas, so it's pretty conservative little district, said, I don't know a single woman who is voting for Donald Trump. Well, I
interesting.
don't know if that ended up being true or, what it was, but I really do think that it's both that, and then there is still the issue of we're not talking about it very much, of Roe v. Wade. And right
Yeah,
now, women's
yeah,
freedom to make their own reproductive decisions is impacted, and it's in states like Kansas and states that like Texas, where people really can't make their own decisions. I think there's both the rhetoric and the actual policies that
right.
we've seen
And
affect
even worse
us.
for Republicans, that they don't want they literally are going to rip healthcare away from people over making sure that they don't have reproductive freedom.
I
And
mean, they really are.
which is as politically stupid a thing that you could possibly ever do. But since you raised it, I mentioned that Kansas is one of those interesting states to me because it's actually moved leftward in the Trump
It
era.
has.
And I'm wondering, people
Yeah, it
don't
has.
pay attention to these states like Kansas and Utah that have moved leftward because they haven't gotten competitive. But is there a universe in which Kansas eventually becomes a purplish state or at least light red?
Well, it's interesting because Kansas moved left and Iowa moved right.
Moved right.
And
Yeah,
both those states, I'd been in, and I think Kansas had gone so far right. And they were kind of like the test bubble for a lot of the national anti immigration movements. Like Chris Kobach was terrible on, voter reforms.
right,
I mean, there were some absolutely heinous. And Kansas is always, I do compare Kansas to California because everyone in Kansas will be a registered Republican, but they're either a moderate Republican or a conservative Republican. And
right,
then the Democrats occasionally win because of that. And so similarly, here in California, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger who can occasionally win because you have a more progressive, liberal, and then you have a more, moderate liberal in California. So, what I have seen in Kansas is Kansas has always been a populous state. It was a free state. The roots there also have like a Black Republican roots in Kansas, in Johnson County, or in Wyandotte County, Kansas. With it's a very so there's people who believe that they're Republicans, but then they see Donald Trump. And Kansas is very military state too. So, because we have, bases, that's why, my grandfather was stationed at McConnell. So, that's why he was in Wichita. So I think you have this population that really doesn't like what Trump has done. to the Republican Party. And so they were willing to go with a more moderate Democrat. Yes, Kansas could be a place that could change further, but I think it really depends on what the Republican Party does next. There's a populism in JD Vance that I think actually would appeal. I mean, I've just been so disappointed in JD Vance. I thought he had a heart when he came on the scene with his book. And I never agreed with his policies, but like having read his book, his experience of, growing up in Ohio was so similar to mine growing up in Illinois, and, the manufacturing loss and the changes and a victim complex type thing, that I thought he was going to be a much more thoughtful politician than he's proved. But he does have a populist root. And so it really depends whether he goes like the route of the Peter Thiel or the route of like the traditional populist on whether he could keep a place like Kansas. That's
I
my
think
thoughts.
his ambition got the better of him, and he's become full MAGA. And I was struck by something yesterday in the
The
Somali rant.
immigration thing yesterday just blew me away from him. Your children are the
Yeah.
grandchildren of immigrants. Like I
Literally,
can't even
his
fathom.
wife is a daughter of an immigrant.
Yeah,
But I was
yeah.
struck by
He
something
is.
really.
He's a child of immigrants. We all are, unless we're native. It's
Um,
But
like, what on
but
earth?
yeah, no, there's a thing in the Times piece about about Trump's Somali rant where he said, "I want people they should go home where they came from," and there was a line in there about how Vance and like slammed the table in agreement. He's such a pathetic little lickspittle. I can't, and I think, by the way, if I were Democrats, I would be the only, I mean, except for the obvious like Nirvana candidate of Donald Trump Jr., which I think is that, by the way, I think is a real possibility. This is my pet
I think
theory.
it is too. I
I
think
think
it
it's
is
I think it's more
too.
possible than people realize. But if Vance is the nominee in 2028, I would feel very confident with Democrats' chances, no matter who they nominate, because I think Vance just doesn't appeal to really anybody outside of maybe core MAGA, and even then, I'm not so sure he appeals to them.
it's interesting. He had a good debate performance, but otherwise he comes off as so inauthentic. I can't imagine that people don't see through him at this point
He
of
was the
like
least
he's
popular
changed on
VP
everything.
nominee ever.
Can I
Right.
Never.
say
And
though,
remember the one time he ran a campaign on his own, he dramatically underperformed
oh, for
Yes,
to
he
get
did.
sure.
made.
Yes, he
And
did.
can I just say also, I think Tim Walz was a historically terrible choice for vice president. And I read her book, Kamala Harris's book, and
Oh,
I was
Shapiro's
so
mad about the book apparently.
oh, he should be. But also, Mark Kelly deserves to be very angry about the book, because in the book, she basically is like, I wasn't sure if this guy, who's like a US senator whose wife's been shot in the head, who served in the military, who was an astronaut, I'm not sure that he had like what it took to be vice president. And it's like, what? Like,
Shapiro
why?
said that she flat out lied about him in the book. He said that in this
What did
Atlantic
she say
profile.
about
So
Shapiro?
she
Something about
basically
art.
so he gets in the car. She had this person, again, she relied on the wrong people. So she had this person who I can't remember where the person is, a dual citizen, an immigrant from Europe, a relatively white country. I can't remember. Anyway, so she relied on this young woman to basically pick up each one of the VP candidates. And she says, and this is something I believe, people will open up to people who are not like the candidate in a different, like, I want to see the way they treat people who are like staff who are helping them to make the decision, which, okay, I understand, right? But what seemed like Shapiro making small talk made the book. He basically got in the car and, as I understand, was like asking how he would get Pennsylvania art into the Naval Observatory. Well, I imagine that he wanted Pennsylvania art into the Naval Observatory, even if Kamala Harris is there. Like, no matter who's there, he wants Pennsylvania art. And it seemed like he was just making small talk, and she took what was relayed to this young woman, her staffer, and she put it
Interesting.
in the book.
And
And
he said
he
that's
says it's not
not
even
true in the
true.
Atlantic
and,
profile.
So I,
and
I
But
will. I got to read
yeah.
the Atlantic piece, but I've heard this from relatively good source, that when Shapiro met with Harris, uh, sh he basically said to her, I want to be in the room with you when you make these decisions. I want to be the last person to talk to you, last person in the room. And
Which is
she
what
basically,
Cheney said, which is what
right.
Biden
And
said. It's not unusual.
right. And she told him that not only would he not be the last person that she taught to make a decision, that she wouldn't even be in the room. He wouldn't even be in the room. And that part of and this was the really strange part, was that she apparently spent a lot of time complaining about how Biden didn't really involve her decision making, but that her approach for the VP
Mm.
was to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about the Waltz thing you mentioned was that my understanding too is that they went to like Shapiro and said, "Do you want to run for president someday?" And he kind of was wishy.
Yes.
I mean, he wasn't going to give a real answer. He's not going to say, "I'm going to run someday." And Waltz was like, "No, I'm not going to run. I just want to be
Why
VP.
do you
I don't
want
want to be governor
people?
anymore."
Why do you want people who are not ambitious? That's what I don't understand. That's
She
to
and
me
she
a
had like
character
5
flaw.
really great choices, and she took the guy who added the least naturally to the ticket. And, it didn't seem like it was a bad choice at the time, but it turned out to be just a
Can
disastrous
I don't,
decision.
Can
listen,
I
look,
say,
it's
I said
never
at the
just, yeah,
time, so I said at the time, like, I've been saying part of the problem in our civics education is that we put the coach of like the high school football team as the civics, as the government teacher. And I
Oh
said,
god.
oh God, I'm going to have to like go back on this. But then I don't think I do have to go back on this.
No,
Like, I
not
think,
especially now with all these scandals now where you call into question and Michael, to
yeah,
be clear, I'm not saying that like she picks the right VP candidate, she wins. What I have argued and will argue is that we might have another Senate seat and we might well have a majority in the House had she
maybe.
picked Shapiro, given what happened in Pennsylvania and how close some of
Maybe
those
some,
races
that's the
were.
best argument for Shapiro that it might have
But
helped Casey win. But I think, but someone just wrote in the chat there that she didn't want someone a VP to upstage her. I
right,
think that's
yeah.
exactly
right.
right. But what I find strange about the whole VP thing was that she made a point apparently of telling Shapiro that Biden treated her like crap, but that she wanted to do the exact same thing to her VP. That's the part that I find really odd about the whole situation.
How
Makes no sense to me.
awful. How awful. Like,
Yeah.
But apparently
yeah.
she felt she was very aggrieved at the way that Biden had treated her. When, not unreasonably so, by
He
the way.
he did give her the worst jobs.
He
Like,
did, but then he
being in
basically,
charge of the
yeah, I gave her exactly, gave her the worst job. Yeah, and then he basically
yeah.
they refused to give her anything to do, and kept her
Yeah.
out of the decision making.
Well, and it's
One
like
thing that's
borders are.
Yeah,
Borders
yeah, I
the
mean,
are.
one
worst.
thing that
What's
was
worse than that?
interesting is that was one of the very few cases I'm thinking back historically. It's one of the very few cases in the modern VP era. Obviously, we don't have a lot of cases, but it was probably the
Yeah.
only one where the president had significantly more governing experience than the vice president.
Mm.
And it I think that probably played a role. You go back and you think about it. Walter Mondale brings in the modern vice presidency because he's got much more national policy making experience than Jimmy Carter. Bush had plenty of experience at the table at various jobs um, in the federal government. Gore had been a senator and a congressman. Cheney had more experience than Bush and was picked for his
Right,
experience.
right.
Biden had a lot more experience than Obama, and Donald Trump
Mhm.
knew
That's why he was
nothing about
picked.
governing. Mike Pence had some.
I guess. I mean, you could say Kennedy and
Yeah.
LBJ is the exception of that, or Nixon and Spiro Agnew. But
Well,
yeah, by and
most
large, I
people
agree
think
with you.
Mondale changed the vice presidency. That's
Right,
that's why it
right.
started there. But I think one reason she didn't get have the same impact as some of the others is it was the first time we picked a really experienced president in a while, where it wasn't the outsider, it was the
Right.
insider.
But she did have opportunities to like seize the moment, whether it was, I know they did give her more with Roe v. Wade in the aftermath. And she also had a series of really unfortunate interviews. Do you remember the first one that was like, well, I haven't been to, it was like, you haven't been to the border. Well, I haven't been, where was it that she said? Like, I haven't been here either.
Oh,
And it's like,
a bunch of other
I don't know.
places.
I'm of the mindset, again, I think it'll be interesting because I think Mayor Pete will probably run. We're likely to see him, on the national stage again. But when it was the Ohio train derailment, like I thought that he needed to go. I did a lot of that. I mean, my job was director of press advance. So like the second that there was a shooting or something awful in some location or a terrible tragedy, like we were getting President Obama there as quickly as we could because that's what you do. Like you go and you respond to issues. And so I just thought that this previous administration under Biden and Harris, like were too dismissive of some of those questions. And now we have a president who doesn't even take questions from a normal press corps. He just
Right.
pushes everybody, including like the Associated Press, out
I,
and puts Marjorie
when we're
Taylor
talking about
Greene
language,
in.
we haven't talked about his comments about female reporters recently. That, like,
Mm,
again, just like the Somali ones, any other president, this would have been a month-long story. This would have been a you should
Scandal.
resign for you saying this scandalous stuff. And it just sort of people just sort of like, oh, that's Donald Trump. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable to me that we've gotten
But
to
I,
this
Yeah.
but I
point.
just, but you gotta look. You're right about everything you said, but this is why he's so unpopular. I mean, I just want
Yeah,
to point
no, it
out
is.
That's
if
true.
you if you look at the New York Times, like their ratings of their the polling average, he did 41% approval, 55% disapproval, which is historically bad. But if you look at like the really good pollsters, his numbers are even worse. A Gallup poll had him down like 26 point. I think it was he only reason why his numbers are not worse is because he's getting these Republican polls that are sort of showing him down like 7 points or 9 points. But he is really, really unpopular. And I'm telling you right now, it's not going to get better. It is not going to get better. He is going to remain unpopular.
And the
All right,
thing is, if the economy doesn't get better, I think what Joanna was saying earlier about the people who sort of try to separate his rhetoric from his policies, when the policies aren't helping them, then they care more about the rhetoric. That's
100%,
that's why it's driving it down. The rhetoric
100%.
all of a sudden is not something you overlook. It's okay, this guy's incompetent and he's offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I love
exactly.
Priscilla. Priscilla just said Trump's press conferences are like watching the Jerry Springer show. And there is a documentary on the Jerry Springer show, and it is so true. Like, I believe that this is all, I have this theory that we're living through like the terrible decision that network executives made in the aftermath of the O.J. Simpson trial. And like O.J. Simpson trial happens, everybody like before that, the Bronco chase happens. Everybody turns to it and they realize, oh my God, we've got something, and everybody's like paying attention to this. And we're watching O.J. Simpson in a Bronco instead of our economy being like, destroyed. Jerry Springer is popular in this era. He's got, cousins who are dating on stage. It's like, and people are watching these car crashes. And it's like car crash after car crash. And then you literally have like the Kardashians spring up in the aftermath of O.J. Simpson, like Kardashian, a business lawyer, and they get a reality show, and then Trump gets a reality show, and he now knows how to drive the camera in. I think like it's a manipulative, but also like incredibly like it's such disgusting brilliance that I'm like, oh my God. Sometimes I'm like, we don't do that. We didn't
But
even
it's,
negotiate.
but I
Obama said he
don't
was
think
going
it's,
to negotiate healthcare. Obama said he was going to negotiate healthcare on C-SPAN. You may remember this. And then when it came to it, we didn't do it. And Michael, I really want to hear what you have to say on this. But I would say, like, truly, like, we didn't use the camera. Trump is using the camera, and it sometimes angers me that we
but
didn't.
I don't think it works for him. I just don't. I mean, I think it worked in
Mhm.
24 because people were upset with Biden and like Harris. But I think whenever he's on camera, he says really offensive, stupid shit that people don't like. I think,
Yeah.
I think people give him way too much. Your point is completely valid, I think, as far as the 2016 campaign, to some extent 2024. But there are limits to Trump's press strategy. And, when he's a candidate, it's more effective. When he's president, it's less effective. And I think, like, don't people forget this now, but in 2020, before the pandemic, Trump was deeply unpopular. In fact, he never led a single head-to-head poll against Biden ever, even before the pandemic. People had given up on
Yeah.
Trump by that point.
Yeah.
And I just think that people just get tired of him. And look, the OJ strategy works only to a certain extent because people still hate OJ Simpson. But by the way, just for the record, my kids are obsessed with the OJ story because we watched the OJ documentary. Which is amazing. We watched the 30 for
I
30.
feel
Like
so
I just think for the
old.
record,
I had to
how
watch that. They
I
rolled
remember,
out they rolled out the TVs into our
yeah,
Galesburg
I was about
public
to say,
schools.
yep,
see,
yep,
I
the
was
little rolling cart into the math class so that we could watch the verdict in the
see,
seventh grade.
I was actually I was like in my 20s, and I was remember working at the time, and I will never forget watching that verdict in a room full of people and the absolute just. And I, by the way, just for the record, I had wagered with a friend of mine a year before that he would get off. I always knew he was going to win, but I mean the absolute shock. And I don't think people who were alive at the time can truly understand or appreciate how much that story took over this country.
No, I don't think
It's
they
No,
can.
I mean,
So,
I don't think they even
uh,
remember the split screen of the car chase during the NBA Finals, where NBC literally had a
yes,
split screen going.
it was
It was
crazy.
guys, go watch the
unbelievable.
30 for 30 on June 17th, 1994 about that sports day.
Yeah,
And
that was
it's the most incredible
crazy.
documentary. And my kids see it and they can't believe it's real. They don't think
Yeah,
it's
So
real.
and we
we're
lived this.
living through it. We're living through the
Yeah,
We're
after
living through it.
impact.
let me make one last point, then we should probably start to
I was
wrap up
gonna
before our
say,
phone batteries
Yeah.
all die.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I actually agree with both of you on Trump. I think that what he's done really well with both the pro wrestling experience and the reality TV experience is that people crave the opposite of Obama in a lot of ways. The celebrity verification, but also the cool, calm, collected, always on message Obama. And what Trump did is he's able to be totally inauthentic while appearing very authentic. And I think it did help him in 2016 and 2024. I, I do think Michael's right that as president, he says things that are so cringy and people expect leadership from their president. And so I don't know that it's not a net negative at this point, but I do think that what happened in a lot of ways in terms of the media environment, in terms of Trump, is that people got tired of the Obama thing of always on message, of surrounding yourself
Yeah.
with celebrities, of that kind of thing. And that in a lot of ways, Trump is the anti-Obama. He's completely unfiltered. He's never on message. He's half the time he's asleep while his cabinet's trying to lick his boots. I mean,
It's
it's
crazy. It's crazy.
he's the
2015,
opposite of that.
I left the administration in 2015, and at the time, I think I would have told you that I would have thought that Democrats would stay in power. And yet, when it came to the election, I actually thought Trump was going to win the first time. I thought we would pull it off this last time. We didn't. I know we have to wrap. I just need to show the dog, the sleeping dog. Oh
Yes,
my.
please show us the dog.
So that's the
And
last
please
thing
tell
for
us,
me.
remind me again the name of your
Yes.
Substack so
Oh,
everyone
it's
can
just
subscribe to
Johanna
it.
Maska, johannamaska.com. I don't have a fancy name. I love your guys' name. It's very, very cute. Let me
Thank
show
you.
you the
Thank you.
dog. Here's the donkey
Oh
Oh,
again.
my God.
Michael,
Stop it.
Now Baxter's going to be angry. He's not getting airtime.
He's like right behind me right now.
Oh, sweet dog. All right, you guys. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so
This was
much.
awesome.
Yeah, it
Thank
was
you so
great.
much for
Thank you for
joining us.
joining us.
Talk to you all soon.
All right.
Yep.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And Michael,
And
before we go, I found the perfect way to end for us. I didn't
sure.
realize this, but Christy Nome said in the cabinet meeting yesterday, you made it through hurricane season without a hurricane. You kept the hurricanes away. We appreciate that. Yes, Donald Trump kept the hurricanes away. You fucking idiot. Like, I'm sorry.
But that's
It's
what these cabinet
unbelievable.
meetings are. It's all about just basically, saying things that make him feel better about himself and pump up his ego. The man's got a limitless
Unbelievable.
need for validation. But I'll go back to what I said. I'll finish up here. Look, I make this point every time we get out together for one of these things of saying that Donald Trump is a deeply unpopular president and he remains unpopular. And I don't think it's going to change. And I think that ultimately is why I expect Democrats taking back the House in 2026 and ultimately the White House in 2028. I think that, that is the most important story in American politics.
And I would say that since we started doing this, I have become more open to the possibility that Democrats take the Senate in 2026. He's becoming less and less popular. We're seeing more and more evidence of a wave, and these things tend to compound. And I think he's just going to keep making it worse. There was a big article in the Times on people who are paying tariff bills. Like UPS is calling them, be like, "Yo, you want your coat? You have to pay more in a tariff than the coat costs."
I saw that.
And
I saw that.
there's more and more people being affected by what he's doing to decimate the economy.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's going to be a political price for that. There always is when people are unhappy and things are not going well. And I know he thinks he's going to put in a more malleable Fed chair and they're going to lower the interest rates and everything's going to get better. But we just got another bad jobs thing, that the private sector is shedding jobs, and that's not a good thing for a president. It never has been, never will be.
No, I agree. And yeah, I just think it's going to get worse. And look, the final thing, I mean, I'd say is just that generally speaking, when a president this unpopular, less than a year out from a midterm election, I saw this a couple of days ago that their numbers just don't usually get better. I think it's like
No,
in the last
I
eight
saw a political
presidencies,
scientist tweeting about this. I don't remember what the stat was, but it was bad.
something at the last like eight elections, no presidents moved more than 5 points in the approval rating between like December of the first term and the midterm election.
Yeah, I mean,
So
the only thing that you could imagine doing that would be some sort of rally around the flag effect, kind of like post 9/11 sort of thing. But even there, he's just
it really didn't happen in the pandemic for Trump. I don't think it'll happen.
no.
I think
No,
people
and the thing is, you need a president who has leadership qualities to get that, and he doesn't. So
he
I
doesn't.
really, I think it's getting late early for Republicans. I would expect that by the time we're together again next week, that there will have been some more retirements. The other thing that people should watch before we're back with you again, the Supreme Court is going to decide something on this Texas map, which is going to have big ramifications for
Or they
Republicans
won't
and their
decide, or they'll kick it down the road, and then
right, right.
it'll no
But
longer matter.
but I think they have to have some sort of ruling on the stay before the filing
They can just
deadline.
delay it.
But
They can delay it past the
maybe
deadline.
they do that. But yeah, I think things are just going to keep getting worse for Republicans. And Trump just keeps digging the hole deeper every day. And by the way, it seems now that they're definitely going to let the ACA subsidies expire, which is not a good thing for the party in power when people's healthcare costs explode.
My prediction: they will extend it before January 31st.
Oh,
That's my
okay.
prediction. You
Okay,
heard it
so
here
they're going to
first,
try. All right, that's a bold prediction. I
and it's
think
a
that
good place.
a politically smart party, this should be a no-brainer, especially because Democrats will give them most of the votes. All Trump has
Exactly.
to do is say, Mike, John, I want this on the floor, vote for this, or I support what they're this. But I don't know. They're not a very competent party, Michael. They're just not
Not these days.
competent.
They're not. Not these days. They're
Oh.
not. But I think we've 2 hours and 7 minutes today. This is a record for
That's our
two bearded
record.
Jews talking about politics.
Yeah,
229
we, we, we're
followers.
we're
Thank
testing my
you.
battery life. I started with 100, I'm down to 13.
I'm at
We're seeing what
8%.
my phone battery is. So
Exactly. Thank you, everyone, for joining
yeah,
us again. This was just a joy. Thank you to Johanna Maska for joining us, which was great. Loved her input. Loved her conversation with her. Back next week with more political chit chat. Hopefully, we'll have a guest to bring you. We'll see where that goes. Don't forget to subscribe to The World According to Brian and Truth and Consequences. Right now, we get 20% off if you subscribe to Truth and
oh wow,
Consequences.
man, that's a
So
bargain.
it's a bargain. It's a bargain. And yeah, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next
Yeah,
Wednesday. Thanks
see
a
you
lot.
next Wednesday. Take care.
All righty. Bye bye.
Bye.